YOLO Julius, it's your girl Raven Chapman, the Omen. Just want to give you a big shout out here from the UK. And Ring IQ, you're the man. Thanks so much for your support.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. We're going to kick it off with Scotney versus Roman, the super bantamweight contest that took place yesterday on the undercard of Buatsi versus Richards. Elise Scotney was just as, if not more dominant than I expected her to be. I actually expected a more cat and mouse kind of fight, cat and mouse kind of situation.
I expected to see a bit more aggression from Maria Roman.
But to start, it was Elise Scotney that was coming forward. It was Elise Scotney that was pressing the action, forcing the issue.
Styles make fights.
Elise Scotney being as in and out as she is, as fleet of foot and fast hands, fast feet.
Going upstairs and downstairs.
Always getting 1 or 2 body shots in there.
Ellie was dominant, and Maria Roman was really never in this fight.
Ellie's got a lot of tools, showed a good variety of punches, head punches, body punches, uppercuts, body shots.
She's not a fighter that's limited to fighting at a certain range.
Mid-range to outside or inside, Elise Scotney can do the business and be responsible whilst doing so. I love what I'm seeing.
Not a hard outcome to predict and not a hard fight to score, given everything we've seen from Ellie.
Who is amassing quite the professional resume. At just 5 wins, no losses, and no draws, Ellie Scotney has already taken on very formidable fighters. Very formidable.
Good, solid fighters. Good, solid victories.
For an unbeaten up-and-comer, they are. The very aggressive Elise Scotney, a former champion in Jorgelina Guanini, another former champion in Maria Cecilia Roman yesterday. This is all in just 5 pro bouts, you understand. 5 professional fights, and she bossed it.
Yeah, at least the goods.
Been saying it for a long time. She won in even more decisive fashion than I expected, because I expected that Maria Cecilia Roman, at least in spots, would be able to impose herself on Ellie, at which point Ellie would have to fight her off. That really wasn't the case. Ellie did what she wanted to do, how she wanted to do it.
She called out Ebony Bridges post-fight.
Reigning IBF bantamweight champion Ebony Bridges, newly crowned. That's not the first time that Ellie Scotney has expressed an interest in moving down in weight from 122 to 118 for a potential Ebony Bridges fight. In truth, I don't think that Ellie Scotney is on Ebony Bridges' radar. I vaguely recall after the Maria Roman fight, Ebony Bridges' last fight, talks of unifying, perhaps getting out there one more time, voluntary title defense this summer, and then a unification match.
Cap off the year.
You know, Ellie Scotney's not a big super bantamweight. I actually happen to think she can make 118 pounds just fine. It's really a question of whether or not Ebony Bridges would be receptive to defending her newly obtained blue belt against Ellie, and if I'm being honest, I don't think Ebony would be receptive to such a fight. What's in it for her? She's the one with the name, and she's the reigning champion.
Being honest, I don't think this fight happens, and I don't think Ellie's on Ebony's radar.
No, I happen to think she'd sooner run it back with Shannon Courtenay in a rematch before she'd give Ellie Scotney an opportunity.
And I think the best thing for Ellie Scotney to do is fight 2-3 more times.
You know, Matchroom actually happens to have one of the champions at 122 pounds on the contract, and she's supposed to be returning to action very soon south of the border in a show set to go down in Mexico.
Early next month on the 10th on the undercard of Kayaguchi versus Bermudez.
Reigning WBA Super Bantamweight champion and newly crowned Matchroom signee, Mayerling Rivas is supposed to be defending her title against Vargas. This will be Mayerling's first fight under the Matchroom banner.
Ellie's fight yesterday was for a WBA Intercontinental title. She's going the WBA route.
That's the path she's on, so I happen to think they shouldn't waste any time worrying about Ebony Bridges and what Ebony's doing, because Ebony likely isn't receptive to that fight anyway. What they should focus on is getting Ellie out there at least one more time.
One more time over the summer months, 2 if they can.
One more time at least ahead of what could be a Mayerling Rivas showdown. Ellie Scotney has the ceiling. She has the talent. All she really needs are the rounds and the experience.
She's gotten valuable experience already with Gangloff, with Guanini, yesterday with Roman.
That should be the focus. No deviations, no detours for fights that aren't likely to happen, like an Ebony Bridges fight. They need to prepare her for Mayerling Rivas.
And the other champions at 122 pounds, because those fights are likelier to happen than an Ebony Bridges fight.
Like the idea of that fight, and I'm not against it, but I'm just being realistic. It doesn't seem like a very likely proposition. Doesn't seem likely to happen, not from where I'm sitting. What is likely to happen is Scotney versus Rivas, and that should be the focus.
Congratulations to Ellie Scotney for advancing to a professional record of 5 wins, no losses, and no draws.
We then come to the super lightweight contest between reigning unified and lineal champion Chantelle and former 2-division champion Victoria Bustos.
And you could see at the start that Chantelle wanted to make a statement.
At the start, she was coming in hot, jabbing, stepping into it, and looking to land big right hands.
Gotta give Victoria Bustos credit for finishing this fight on her feet and being slippery.
Because if she was anything in this fight, she was that. that. She made herself a moving target, a hard target, though she was never actually in this fight. She never mounted anything.
She never mounted any kind of offense, you understand. It was Chantelle bossing
It from the opening round to the 10th and final round. Great variety of punches, straight punches, body shots, uppercuts.
She was fleet of foot the whole time.
As the fight progressed, you saw that Victoria Bustos tried her best to make it a fight, tried her best to get into it, at which point Chantelle...
Get on the balls of her feet and move around.
She is equally capable of playing both the aggressor and the defender. I want to say that she won every single round in this fight. 10 out of 10 rounds.
It wasn't ever competitive. It wasn't close.
Not by any stretch of the imagination. Ahead of the fight, I told you, Victoria Bustos don't do nothing better. Nothing better than Chantelle Cameron. Chantelle has her beat in every department in terms of speed, power.
She's easily a better physical specimen than Victoria Bustos.
She's a better boxer by far. I think that if this fight didn't end in a knockout, it's because Victoria Bustos spent most of it just trying to hang on and trying to survive.
She spent most of it slipping, rolling, and riding punches, but not mounting anything in terms of offense.
Yeah, she did plenty to survive, just not enough to win. Far from it. Chantelle pitched the shutout. She won 10 out of 10 rounds on my card. Not a hard fight to score at all. Not a hard outcome to predict. Post-fight, she was asked about the Kaylee Reese.
The undisputed title fight with the only other unified champion at this weight, Kaylee Reese.
You could see she still feels raw about it. She's a little bit disgruntled that she wanted to go into that fight. She wanted to vie for undisputed. This fight she just had yesterday on the undercard of Buatsi versus Richards, it was little more than a keep busy fight.
She wants to fight for undisputed.
As post-fight, she said it herself. A Jessica McCaskill fight gets her juices going more than the idea of a Kaylee Reese fight. She seems a bit disheartened by the entire situation, tired of having to wait for her big moment and her big fight, what was supposed to be the Kaylee Reese fight. Kaylee Reese herself has provided some reassurances.
Earlier this week, she reassured by way of her social media that the fight will happen.
But Chantelle doesn't seem to be holding her breath. Very soon, Jessica McCaskill is set to defend all her belts at 147 pounds against Mexico's own Alma Ibarra on the undercard of Bam Rodriguez versus Sorung Visay. That's set to go down in a few weeks' time. And I wouldn't mind seeing Chantelle move up in weight and take on the winner of that fight if things are still slow to the punch with Kaylee Reese.
Neither would Chantelle. In so many words, that's what she said.
Now, I'm not critical of the matchmaking in yesterday's fight. Victoria Bustos is a former 2-division champion, after all. She's very experienced. But Chantelle, I think she's somewhat past fighting these kinds of fighters. She's more or less over it, and she wants to be challenged. Victoria Bustos, she's no challenge for Chantelle Cameron.
I said as much before the fight. Victoria don't do nothing better than Chantelle.
Victoria Bustos would be fortunate to finish this fight on her feet. She'd be fortunate not to get knocked out by Chantelle Cameron, and credit to her. She didn't, but she was never in that fight. Chantelle Cameron don't want to be part of...
Sounds to me like she doesn't want lighter touches or foregone conclusion fights.
She doesn't want to just be busy, just keep busy. She wants to carve out a legacy of her own. She wants to have her own big fights.
Yeah.
And
she's tired of waiting.
So like I said, I don't know what's going to happen with that Kaylee Reese fight. I don't know exactly what the holdup is, but what I do know is Chantelle seems receptive to moving up in weight yet again and seeing about fighting the winner of McCaskill versus Ibarra. So if things are slow to the punch with Kaylee, I say go for it. We then come to the all-action shootout, the battle of the ABs. Alen Babic versus Adam Balski. Croatia versus Poland. And what really was...
This was the most entertaining fight on the card by far, more entertaining even than the main event.
Alen Babic, a fighter who stays in character, a fighter who's characteristically come forward aggressive, taking chances and winging shots. He saw himself getting dropped in the very first round of this fight. The same thing that makes Alen such an entertaining guy to watch is the same thing that one day
it might get him knocked out, and he came very close in this fight.
Balski, he wanted this to be a boxing match, and Alen Babic does anything but box. He's there to mess you up real bad. He didn't give Balski the room and the real estate to move and punch.
Set up shots and set up punches.
And Adam Balski, he's no pushover. Ahead of this fight, he only suffered one professional loss, and that was at the hands of the very experienced and capable Matthias Masternak, one of the better fighters at or around these weights. This is a guy who, ahead of this fight, sported a pro record of 15 wins, 1 loss, never been stopped.
The guy's never been knocked out.
He came very close at the hands of Alen Babic, who was determined to make this anything but a boxing match. He got off to a rough start in the first round, though.
After the first round, this became an Alen Babic fight, characteristic of an Alen Babic boxing match.
Which, if you're familiar with Alen, is anything but a boxing match. It's basically just Alen closing the distance, closing the gap, crowding pounding the guy, winging big shots, going for the gusto, and taking chances, which is what makes him so entertaining, albeit limited, as a fighter. He's not a hard guy to read. You know what he's going to do. It's just a question of whether or not the man opposite the ring has...
Does the guy opposite the ring have the wherewithal to not get knocked out?
Can he weather the storm from Alen the Savage Babic and still be effective, still get some work done? Balski could, and after a while, Balski's just getting pinned down on those ropes and allowing Alen Babic to overwhelm him. Unload, though Balski did make it competitive in spots. He did hurt Alen Babic, by my count, at least 2 to 3 times. He knocked him down in the first round. In the 9th,
towards the very end of the round,
as the bell is sounding, he connects with a shot that takes the legs away from Alen Babic, who staggered to his corner. You wondered if at the start of the next round, will he have his legs under him, because he was noticeably hurt by the shot.
Yeah, he was worse for wear after the 9th.
The end of the 9th, that led to a very dramatic 10th round, as both men were going for the gusto. Both guys were really going for it.
You often hear it said in many circles that say what you want, but Alen Babic is made for TV.
You often hear it said that there's never a dull moment when Alen Babic is in the ring, and yesterday's contest was no exception. I ain't too good.
I love it.
I ain't too good for an Alen Babic fight, and I ain't gonna make no bones about that. He's an entertaining fighter to watch.
I don't have any illusions about the guy.
This was intended to be a step towards the WBC Bridgerweight title that is held by Oscar Rivas, Canadian-based fighter born out of Colombia, who's supposed to be in action very soon against his WBC mandatory challenger,
unbeaten Lucas Rosensky of Poland.
The fight's supposed to go down 2 months from now in August in Oscar Rivas' native Colombia. Cecilia Brækhus is going to be vying for the WBC junior middleweight title against reigning junior middleweight champion Patricia Bagul. We've talked about that fight. We've talked about that card.
Alen's fight yesterday is supposed to be a step in that direction.
Because Oscar Rivas is set to satisfy his mandatory challenger by way of the WBC in August, you can deduce that it will be some time before he's ordered to satisfy another, provided he actually makes his way past Rosensky. In any event, if it's Alen Babic's intention to challenge the winner of that fight, he will need to be better. And I'm not proposing that you give the guy a complete overhaul, try to turn him into more of a boxer instead of a puncher. No, he's a puncher. He's a pressure guy through and through. And he needs to stay in character because that's when he's at his best.
He doesn't need to change what he's doing. He needs to refine it and fine-tune it.
We saw a good jab, and I think a double jab from Alen Babic yesterday to get within striking distance of his opponent, get that guy to holster his guns and defend himself whilst you close the gap, jabbing your way in. I want to see more of that from Alen Babic. I think he could do with 2, maybe even 3 more fights before he challenges the winner of that fight. He doesn't necessarily need to change a whole lot about himself as a fighter, just refine and fine-tune.
Looks like he's trying to become the mandatory challenger for the winner of that fight, and that could take a year.
Although the winner of that fight could always opt to defend the title against Alen as a voluntary. That is yet another option. But I think it very much behooves Alen Babic to use that time to his advantage, as it will be some time before the winner of that fight has to satisfy a mandatory challenger. He needs to get rounds in the bank.
Not just for experience, but to work on things.
You can beat the Molinas and Spillmonts and Balskis of the world doing what you're doing, but I do get the sense it will take more than that to lift the green belt from either Oscar Rivas or Rosensky, the winner of that fight.
For what it's worth, Alen Babic is becoming one of the biggest names, if not the biggest name, at this weight.
2-3 more fights, he could become the cash cow of this division, more so than the reigning Bridgerweight champion, whether it stays Oscar Rivas or it ends up being Rosensky. In any event, Alen Babic needs to work on things.
The courageous fighter, always entertaining.
I fucking love watching him in action, but I don't have any illusions about him either. It may take more than what we saw yesterday to see Alen Babic crowned as this division's champion.
Needs to be better.
Finally, we come to the main event of that same card, the light heavyweight contest, the domestic clash between Craig Richards and Joshua Buatsi, in a fight that I had scored around
8-4.
8 rounds to 4 in favor of Joshua Buatsi to 9 rounds to 3. Though, it's the funniest thing, in spite of having it that way for Joshua Buatsi, it was still a very competitive contest in every single round. Every single round.
Yeah.
I count 2 swing rounds in this thing.
The first round was a swing round.
There was another 1 or 2 swing rounds towards the end in the latter half, the second half of this fight. It was a fight where Craig was falling just short of the mark, and the optics of the match, whenever both boys let their hands go, it just looked a lot like Joshua Buatsi was getting the better end of it in what was a very tense fight.
Both Joshua and Craig respect respected each other's power. You could see that.
Between the exchanges, there were a lot of quiet moments and tense moments where you could see both boys are trying to figure each other out, looking for safe entry before they would explode on each other in bursts.
This was particularly true of Joshua Buatsi, who was fighting in spurts.
Fighting in bursts. It wasn't a sustained attack on either front from either Craig Richards or Joshua Buatsi, though when it comes to Joshua Buatsi, you could see that he does in fact pack the bigger punch, and I suspected as much ahead of the fight. I told you, I suspect Craig has enough that he can hurt Joshua Buatsi, but Joshua Buatsi is the bigger puncher. He actually hurt Craig Richards in the very first round.
He found out early he can hurt the guy.
They still came off as somewhat tentative to me, in spite of finding out in the very first round that he packs a big enough wallop that if he presses this guy, he can take him out. Both guys, in truth, were tentative.
Every time Joshua did let his hands go, you could see he was faster. You could see he was stronger.
And the optics. Even though there's not much between Joshua and Craig in terms of the tail of the tape, when they're actually fighting, when they're
in the ring, Craig Richards looks like he's the longer guy.
When they're trading, Craig Richards often looked off balance when Joshua Buatsi was letting his hands go. That gives you the impression that Joshua Buatsi, he is getting the better end of those exchanges. He's coming out on top.
It's the optics, though. It was the optics.
And I saw both boys hurt each other in this fight. I saw both boys get off shots that looked to have stunned the other guy, but it just felt like Joshua's doing a little more. It just looks a little better, a little neater, a little tidier.
Though still tentative.
Few hang-ups when it comes to Joshua Buatsi is that he was obviously faster than Craig Richards, obviously stronger, though not necessarily busier. A lot of the rounds that I gave Joshua Buatsi were rounds where he did just enough to where he's nicking the rounds.
Yeah.
And this is happening enough times that
it happened enough times in enough rounds that I had it 8-4 Joshua Buatsi.
This is what I mean. In spite of having it 8-4 to 9-3 for Joshua Buatsi, it wasn't like he outclassed Craig Richards or throttled him. He did just enough times, in enough rounds to where he won the fight.
Does this mean he's ready for Dimitri Bivol?
No, I don't think it does. He would have needed to be a lot more dominant, Craig, in order to convince me that he's ready for a fight like that. This was a victory, but not necessarily an emphatic one. The rounds themselves, inside the round, things were very competitive, and Joshua Buatsi was very economic, tentative, hesitant, almost.
You find out in the first round that you can hurt this guy, you can stun him, and you don't finish him off.
You don't press him. In this fight, there were a lot of quiet moments where not a lot is happening. Not on Joshua Buatsi's end of the spectrum. He's not jabbing, he's not doing much of anything, really, and I feel in order to take on those world-class fighters and those world champions and secure the W, he would need to be at least busier with the lead hand, even if you're not looking to set up a power shot, even if you're just biding your time a bit.
Conserving energy and gathering strength.
Still put that lead hand out there, touch the guy on the arms, touch the guy on the gloves, get a couple of shots in there, be busier, because if you're not throwing punches at world level, the other guy is.
Get away with those quiet moments with Craig Richards, but not with a Zerto Ramirez, not with an Artur Beterbiev, not with a Dimitri Bivol.
Being honest, Joshua won the fight for me, but he's not ready for Dimitri.
Just being honest.